long before iron chains were forged, long before prisons and walls were built, humans were already bound, not by metal, but by something far more effective: fear, belief, obedience shaped inside the mind. Empires did not rise on strength alone. They rose because people learned to submit without being physically restrained. In the earliest civilizations, survival depended on unity. Small tribes faced predators, hunger, and the unknown forces of nature. Those who obeyed leaders survived. Those who questioned too much often did not. Slowly, obedience stopped being a choice and became instinct. Fear taught humans when to listen, when to stay silent, and when to follow. As societies grew, leaders realized a dangerous truth. Controlling bodies was difficult. Controlling minds was permanent. Violence could crush rebellion, but it also created martyrs. It inspired resistance. It demanded constant force. But fear, once planted deeply enough, worked on its own. It whispered warnings even when no guards were present. Kings and rulers learned that power was strongest when it appeared invisible. When people believed authority was natural, inevitable, divinely ordained, temples rose beside palaces. Priests spoke of gods who demanded obedience. Disobedience was no longer just a crime. It became a sin. The invisible chains tightened. In ancient empires, punishment was public, but control was private. Executions were staged not just to kill, but to teach. One body destroyed to discipline thousands. The crowd did not just watch death, they absorbed a lesson. Fear entered homes, conversations, and dreams. Parents taught children what not to say, what not to think, what not to question. But the most effective chains were not built from terror alone. They were built from routine. Laws repeated daily, rituals performed endlessly, hierarchies accepted without challenge. People began to police themselves. Neighbors watched neighbors. Silence became survival. As empires expanded, rulers could no longer rely on constant violence. Too much blood weakened control. So fear evolved. It became subtle, bureaucratic, quiet. Records replaced whips. Taxes replaced swords. Surveillance replaced armies. People obeyed not because soldiers stood nearby, but because punishment was always possible. The invisible chains spread through language, titles, symbols, crowns, thrones. Architecture itself was designed to intimidate. Massive structures reminded citizens of how small they were, how distant power had become, how unreachable. Over time, obedience stopped feeling forced. It felt normal. Generations were born into systems they never chose. Authority became tradition. Resistance became unthinkable. Fear no longer needed to scream. It whispered. Empires flourished not because they ruled through constant brutality, but because people carried the empire inside themselves, in habits, in thoughts, in silence. The strongest chains were the ones no one could see. And yet, these invisible chains carried a hidden weakness. The same fear that created obedience also erased truth. Rulers stopped hearing honesty. Advisors spoke carefully. Reality bent to please power. Slowly, the empire began to believe its own illusion. Fear had built something vast, something powerful, something fragile. The invisible chains that built empires eventually became the reason they collapsed. Fear was effective, but it was never stable. It demanded constant reinforcement, and the longer it ruled, the more distorted reality became. As obedience became automatic, rulers grew isolated. Surrounded by silence, they mistook fear for loyalty. Applause replaced honesty. Praise replaced truth. Those who questioned were removed. Those who warned were silenced. Slowly, power lost its connection to the people it controlled. Empires stopped listening, and when power stops listening, it begins to rot. Fear-based rule created compliance, but it destroyed trust. Citizens followed laws outwardly while resisting inwardly. Loyalty became performance. Smiles became masks. Beneath obedience, resentment grew quietly. Waiting, people adapted. Resistance no longer looked like rebellion. It became subtle, slow, passive. Work slowed. Taxes vanished. Information was hidden. Empires appeared stable on the surface while decaying underneath. Rulers responded the only way fear-based systems know how, by tightening control. More surveillance, harsher punishments, stricter laws. But each attempt only deepened the disconnect. Fear could suppress anger, but it could not erase it. As generations passed, belief systems weakened. Myths lost credibility. Divine authority felt distant. People no longer feared gods the way their ancestors had. The invisible chains began to crack. History shows this pattern repeatedly. Rome, dynasties, kingdoms, empires that ruled the world collapsed not from invasion, but from internal decay. Fear built obedience, but it also destroyed innovation. Creativity died. Progress slowed. Adaptation failed. When crises came, famine, disease, war, fear-based systems proved fragile. People no longer trusted leaders. Orders were ignored. Authority dissolved faster than it had formed. The invisible chains snapped, but the story does not end there. Because fear never truly disappeared, it transformed. Modern systems learned from ancient empires. Control became cleaner, psychological, administrative, digital. Fear no longer relied on public executions. It relied on uncertainty, surveillance, economic pressure, social consequences. The chains became lighter, harder to see, easier to deny. Today, obedience still exists without chains. People fear exclusion more than punishment, silence more than violence, loss of status more than death. The empire no longer needs to announce itself. It lives quietly inside routines, systems, and expectations. The lesson of history is not that fear disappears, but that it evolves. Empires are no longer built with whips and swords alone. They are built with invisible forces that shape behavior, reward conformity, and punish dissent without blood. And just like before, these chains will one day break. Because fear can control people, but it can never truly own them.